You're listening to Digital Employee Experience, a show for IT changemakers. Let's get into the show.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome to the show. I'm Tom McGrath, joined as ever by the main man, Tim Flower. How are you today, Tim?
I'm doing great, Tom. How are you? I'm thankful to not be shoveling snow, so all is good.
Yeah, I hear you had a bit of snowfall out there. I'm okay. I'm slightly alarmed because today, for the first time, we have to juggle even, not our usual one guest, but a very special double bill. Hopefully the reason we wanted to bring these two great guests together will soon become abundantly clear. But let's first welcome them. Dion Hinchcliffe is VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. He is an internationally recognized business strategist, best-selling author, and much more, widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in digital strategy, the future of work, and enterprise IT. He's also made his first fantastic contributions to the Nexthink blog just recently. Dion, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Thomas. It's great to be here.
And could I ask, Dion, I did hear a rumor that you were actually named after a Greek god. This sounds too far-fetched a rumor to possibly be true, but I wonder if you could confirm or deny.
It's entirely true. So when I was a kid, we lived in San Francisco on the corner of Haight and Ashbury, which was, if you know that, that's
certainly do.
The center of where the 60s really got their kickoff. And my parents wanted to name me something fun and important, and so they named me after the Greek god Dionysus. But they thought that'd be a little unwieldy to walk around with that name all the time, so they cut it short, Dion. So
fantastic name and a fantastic origin. Were your parents like hanging out with the merry pranksters down there, Dion? Was it?
Well, actually, they were a little straight-laced. It's interesting. So we lived right there. They liked being in the proximity of all the free thinking. And, my dad actually knew Jack Kerouac, who was hanging out there at that time. That was before I was born. But yeah, they were all in the middle of all that.
And we'd also like to welcome our friend, colleague, and fellow Nexthinker, Sean Malvey. Sean is a writer and editor. He's written for the Boston Globe, among others, and has recently driven and overseen and now unleashed the Nexthink Pulse Report, which we will hear more about in due course. Sean, welcome to the show.
Gentlemen, glad to be here. Thank you.
And Sean, what are you named after? What's the origin story behind the name Sean? Come on.
Just another Irish name from a kid from New England. So there's millions of me out there.
Well, you are both hugely welcome to the show, gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Yeah, I think I always love the mix of guests that we got here, and both of you are tremendous talents and have a lot to share. Dion, curious, the research that you've done really seems to be focusing in on this whole notion of the experience of employees as they interact with technology, right? Nexthink speaks to it in terms of digital employee experience, but I'm curious how significant a trend, and is that even the right word? Is it a trend or a fad, or do you think that this has some longevity and legs? And what drove your curiosity here?
Well, what's interesting is, over the last year, digital employee experience has become the primary employee experience. So, it's interesting. It's been usually the 11th priority of any top 10 priorities of an organization is to invest in the employee experience. Something else always comes first, whether it's cybersecurity or moving to the cloud or analytics and understanding all of your data. Our actual workplace has been underinvested in for years. And then that really bit us last year when we all suddenly had to go remote. So now those who really have been paying attention understand that that's, how you deliver value to your customers is made possible through your employee experience, and making it hard for your workers. You're giving them friction, not giving the great tools to do their job that we now have in great abundance. That's just the wrong focus. And so it's been great to see this enormous level of investment, interest, a renaissance in employee experience. So I've been gratified that my research area for the last 20 years has now suddenly become the hottest thing out there, because that's all we have now. Unless you're an essential worker, which is not most of us, you're now, a digital employee.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Just a follow-up there. I don't know who the great philosopher was who said it, but necessity is the mother of invention, right? So we're focusing on this now because we have to. But what do you think the reasons were for a lack of attention in the past? Was it funding and budget? Was it the need is going to be low risk? What do you think drove that lackadaisical attitude?
Well, people who are not in IT don't understand how much of an investment has been made into IT for just the workers. So the average, if you look at the IT spend in a large company, it's about $30,000 a person per year. And about half of that, $14,000-15,000 on average, is spent on the end user experience. The other ones are like customer facing. We're talking total spend of IT, it's about $30,000. So the organizations are already spending, $15,000 a year to keep the licenses and the lights on and all these different apps. There's usually hundreds of applications that run a given business. And so the challenge is they're already spending so much that adding more to that per employee, those numbers really add up. You have to have something that's going to have significant impact. And so we've already done all the easy things. You think about that, how much IT is, all that's been purchased for a reason, not because it's nice to have, but for a particular reason. And so you have to have something that everyone's going to look at it, say, even $25 a year per worker is a big number when you're talking about a 100,000 person organization, right? So people say, well, what are we going to get from that? And forever we're locked in these ROI discussions. What's this value? And it's another thing to train the user on, and it's another thing to onboard everybody for, and to support and to pay for every year. So we're getting actually more and more technology all the time. But the reality is the landscape is very complicated, and it's hard to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Sean, it's a perfect time then to talk about your new report. So first of all, please tell us about what inspired it and how you went about getting the data.
Yeah, sure. So I think the inspiration behind the Pulse report very much came from the pandemic itself. We've run surveys before in the past, pre-pandemic, largely focusing on the digital employee experience. But as soon as we're all kind of forced to shift to a remote work, or at least a hybrid working environment, this just became more and more relevant to us. We also heard a lot of stories, through our customers and from different conferences about the challenges that IT leaders were facing. So we decided to take a microscope to the situation and find out how people were faring. So we actually teamed up with a market research firm out of Silicon Valley called Pulse. And basically the idea was, if I could get, a few hundred technology executives, the C-suite, in a room and ask them questions. Obviously, it's pretty difficult to do pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, but if I could do that and ask them these burning questions, what could we do with that? How would we see that report play out?
One of the things that I found interesting, and each of the reports or studies that we put out is unique and interesting in its own way. This one looks like one of the powerful components to this was the ability to track data over time. What kinds of things did you find in that trend line relative to employee experience? What kinds of things did you discover in that tracking?
Yeah, definitely. So I think what was interesting with this was we had the fortune of surveying IT leaders in the past. So we were able to see, basically ask a section of IT leaders, do you agree that digital employee experience is essential to your IT department? And we asked them in May of 2019, way before the pandemic, this question, and about half of IT leaders agreed with that statement. We then were able to ask them again early in May 2020, so in the early days of the pandemic, and that jumped up to almost 80% agreeing with that statement. And then with this Pulse report, we asked them again, a similar group, the same question, and that jumped up to around 96%. So it's the relevancy of the digital employee experience, it's not in doubt. It's certainly important, on top of mind for many IT leaders.
What kinds of things did you find as you saw that data come in? There's this notion of understanding the enterprise and understanding employees and their experience. Gathering all those metrics can be a valuable exercise, but it's really useless without action, right? Companies have to take that and now formulate action plans based on data and based on information. Are you seeing results come in that enterprises and businesses are actually acting upon the data that is being exposed to them?
Well, I'd actually posit it like this. So, we've seen this surge in the relevancy of digital employee experience within these IT departments, but we then followed up on that and said, do you have the ability to actually measure it? You can't really improve it if you can't measure it. And unfortunately, only a third of the respondents said that they can measure it, but with manual methods. And roughly half said that they don't measure it at all. So it's definitely a challenge that I think a lot of IT leaders are now facing and realizing.
Dion, did you have a chance to look at the Pulse report yourself, and were there any statistical trends that stood out to you in particular?
Well, I did look at it, and what was interesting is, I did my own survey of what I felt were the top 100 CIOs in the world, saying, what are you going to do for 2021? And we see the same things like cybersecurity stands out head and shoulders. But when I made the list, top leading organizations or at the edge of forefront of IT, digital transformation actually came out slightly ahead of cybersecurity, because our workers have moved. And our customers have changed their behaviors. They want to be serviced at home. So we had the two major audiences, the two largest audiences have all shifted their behaviors. And now digital transformation is a mandate. And we did it halfway. We did it in a hurried way in 2020 and 2021. That's the priority. In fact, the first 6 months of the year, the data showed that that's what they're expecting to make major changes and shifts. So, that's, along with all the other things that Sean was talking about there, which also came up on my survey is, workers are really struggling. IT can't keep up with the support. In fact, 70% of the workers I surveyed in another effort said that they don't think IT has everything they need to support them. So we have a lot of work to do. But the good news is we have better tools than we've ever had before to drive that change. And I'm trying to encourage IT. Don't look at the stuff you have now. Look at these much more powerful new tools and ways of working. That's what we should be investing in.
Yeah, Diane, it's interesting you talk about the notion that digital transformation is still top on the list, but it's being challenged by other things. I've made the argument recently that digital transformation, that one of the reasons it's on the top of the list is because the 2020 transformations were the ones that were being executed for survival. It wasn't the ones we planned on. It was almost like 2020 was a throwaway year. And now we've got to get back to work, and we're actually behind the eight ball, and we've got a lot more to do. Do you hear executives talking in those terms, or is it
completely? I would say that 2020 wasn't felt as wasted. It was felt as it was a year of imperative. All those things that we were supposed to have been doing and we've been been forced to put off, we now had to do. We suddenly had to create an entirely new digital employee experience with many of the same old systems, but we had to make it, we had to make it much more productive and much more accessible. And same thing with our customers. So I talked to one mortgage company who said that, when the pandemic started, they didn't have remote signatures, digital signatures, that they FedEx everything to your house. This is a major company. They realized they were going to go out of business because people were shopping around and finding that other mortgage companies could do everything electronically, no FedEx, all online. And they had a decision to make. Either we adapt this now, which they had all these regulatory reasons and process reasons why they couldn't do it. Well, they did it in a couple months to stay alive. Right. And so it's not a lost year. It's a year of step change. It's a quantum leap for many organizations to get the changes they had to get done.
That's a great point. One of the things that Tom and I try to do is we talk a lot about the technology. We talk a lot about our employees, but we also like to focus on the IT people as well that are doing all of this work. What are your thoughts about, how these trends, these fast evolution, it's not revolution, it's very fast evolution of technology, but what does it mean to the future for an IT career? How do you see IT career planning and development continuing to mature based on these changes?
We are seeing, and over the last couple of years, and this started before the pandemic, a real shift in how people were looking at the IT career path. Some people were still looking for lifetime careers, but others wanted to work on projects of their choice. They wanted to use the very latest skills and maybe and latest technologies, and maybe their company wasn't using them yet. So we've seen this large rise of the gig workforce in IT. We typically think of the gig economy as an Uber driver, hardly making any money. But we've now seen this enormous rise of the professional gig economy, and I have a short list on that name of the top companies, and it's a big way of sourcing talent now. CIOs tell me they use these services all the time. I've talked to the big system integrators. They're sourcing a lot of their talent, not low double-digit percentages, but middle double-digit percentages of talent, like half their workforce, using these new on-demand tools. And this allows this kind of designer IT career where you can pick the projects that inspire you the most. You can choose the technologies and products you like, and people who want that come to you, and you get to work on from wherever you want, however you want. That has a lot of appeal, and it's not for everybody. And so it's not yet a majority model, but there is a chance that it will, over the next 5 years, become a majority model. It's growing that quickly. So we see this more on-demand staffing where, your IT staffing curve looks like your business demand curve. Right. So if business goes down, you don't have to pay these people, but they still have lots of work to go off and do. And so that is perhaps the most substantial shift in a generation that I've seen in IT, and we're tracking that closely.
Sean, final question about the report itself. One of the interesting trends, I think, that you found concerned ticket volume. I wonder if you could go into that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So early on in the pandemic, we pulled a group of IT leaders, and about half of them cited that, their support tickets was a big challenge for them. We went back in the Pulse report towards the end of 2020, and 70% of IT leaders cited ticket volume as an issue, most of which that volume has gone up about 50% for these people. I think the important thing, though, that sometimes gets lost in this, though, obviously, IT departments might be drowning in tickets, but it's also, what about the times when people are not bringing up the ticket? And we found that in other surveys that we've done in the past, where we've looked at 1,000 employees, 2,000 senior IT leaders, that on average, about half the time, people don't even report the issues that they're facing. So for those instances, that can cost companies millions of dollars just on lost productivity. So, they obviously have to get more proactive in the way that they're able to find and solve problems when it's presented to them, but also before, I report an issue to the IT desk, they should be able to figure that out.
Fantastic. Well, look, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you both. Dion, Sean, happy 2021. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot, guys.
And that's the end of this week's show. What you no doubt want to do right now is go and read the Pulse Nexthink report, which you can find free of charge in the show notes. Until next time, Changemakers.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how Nexthink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nexthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.